We're talking about aphasia now. Lockdown has been an incredibly difficult time for all of us, but for stroke survivors who have aphasia, it can be even more isolating and lonely. A stroke happens every 5 minutes in the UK, and around a third of stroke survivors will have aphasia, according to the Stroke Association. Aphasia can affect a person's ability to speak, read and write, and even their ability to understand speech and use numbers. We can speak to our reporter, Vicky Carter now. Hi there, Vicky.
Hi, good afternoon, Michelle and Tony.
Good afternoon. Firstly, can you tell us a bit more about aphasia and just how the pandemic has actually affected those who have it?
Of course, well, as you quite rightly highlighted there, aphasia is an acquired communication difficulty. And one of the causes is by having a stroke. And people with aphasia find it difficult to communicate. But I must highlight that their intelligence is not affected, which actually can be quite demoralizing at times. Trying to communicate and share how you're feeling, ordering a pizza, ordering a coffee, but not being able to speak is really frustrating. And it varies, unfortunately, between each individual. It's so unique. It can be severe, but it also can be moderate. It can vary between if someone can understand complex sentences to numbers. And because of lockdown, connection through the everyday opportunities is limited. That practice to keep up those skills has gone completely out the window. And communication skills and confidence, which goes hand in hand at times, has nosedived. And those connections we take for granted. It's incredibly isolating to not be able to express, what you're having for dinner or what you want or ordering something simple or even being able to share your day with others. And depression is so high with stroke survivors, and it's even further isolating with aphasia. But even now in lockdown, those simple conversations with the beautician or the hairdressers or ordering a pint for so many months, it that opportunity wasn't available. And so a number of individuals' speech has been affected. The Stroke Association say that 7 in 10 stroke survivors are more anxious and depressed in the pandemic than they were before.
It's, as you say, it's those everyday conversations that can mean so much on a personal level, but also helping with speech. Now, this is a subject that's really close to your heart, isn't it, Vicky?
Yeah, unfortunately, so my mum had a stroke when I was 4, and it's all I've ever known my mum to have aphasia, and it's what I grew up with. And so I really noticed how her speech had worsened throughout the first lockdown. And I was having simple conversations over the phone, over WhatsApp video calls, that she was struggling with her speech with just naming certain food that she was having for dinner, and it was quite shocking, really, because it also really impacts your confidence as well. And so sometimes she'd get frustrated and say, oh, and I'd have to be really patient with her and say, no, come on, I'm waiting, I'm listening. And it was difficult during the early years of my life explaining to partners and friends and schoolmates, this is how you speak to my mum, because it's so misunderstood, the condition. Not many people are aware of it. And so I had to highlight, her intelligence isn't affected. She will understand what you've got to say. And although it was difficult for me, I mean, think about how difficult it was for my mum. She's so inspirational. She's so courageous and very stubborn. and um, yeah, I'd like you to hear this next clip of my mum. It highlights the confidence in her communication skills and how it's been affected by the pandemic.
Chris Carter, sorry, speak. I'm sorry, it's fine.
No, just take your time.
I can't speak.
How old are you?
Ah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
70.
No, that's not wrong.
Close to 70.
No. 50.
50. Right. Well, that's a blatant lie, but sure. And how old were you when you had your stroke?
A long time. 1, 2 years, and then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
26 years ago.
Yes.
Do you remember the moment of having the stroke?
Ambulance. Then Nothing really.
Vicky, that really gives us an insight into how aphasia can affect your speech. Thanks so much for sharing that with us. What support is your mum getting at the moment?
Well, luckily for my mum, she's been attending her local support group called Discover for actually over 15 years. So she's been there for quite a long time. And I think it's so important to have a community of other people like you. I mean, if both you and I know that, we'll have our own community networks that we can share our own experiences. And it's exactly the same for stroke survivors, and even more so for those with aphasia. Luckily, they moved their sessions online on Zoom. But on that same hand, obviously Zoom brings its own difficulties, especially for those with aphasia. I mean, it's difficult for many people having a Zoom conversation anyway with your colleagues or your family and friends. But for managing the equipment for those with aphasia, also communicating your needs and having a conversation and understanding each other, when to jump in and continue that conversation is difficult. But obviously, in this current climate, it is a lifeline. Rosemary Townsend, the director of service at Discover, explains what it was like when the first lockdown was announced.
We had to close everything in March. Our immediate thought was for the membership, the existing membership, how are we going to keep in touch with these people? I don't think at any point we considered putting Discover on hold or stopping our services. We needed to find a way that would work for us to keep in touch with this community and help them to maintain that feeling of support. We started on this sort of mission to establish Discover at home, and it has exceeded all expectations. We have had an enormous number of people who I would never have dreamed would be able to manage technology and video calling have succeeded. We have provided a lot of support, encouragement, aphasia-friendly instructions. We've loaned iPads to people. We now have the vast majority of people connecting on Zoom. My advice would be to find long-term support of some sort. That kind of term peer support is, I think, what gets people through. Find your tribe, find someone like you, and don't lose hope.
Rosemary Townsend there, and we're speaking more to Rosemary a little later in the programme. Vicky, how important is it for people to know that there is support out there for people like your mum?
Well, I think Rosemary quite rightly highlighted there is always to have hope. And finding your tribe is so important. Find your local support group, whether that is Discover or whatever is local to you. Speaking to a GP for recommendations, going to the Stroke Association. I know that they've got a helpline, they've got a Here For You telephone support service, which has been so helpful and beneficial throughout the entirety of the pandemic, as well as they have a groups themselves on their website, but also different strokes as well. That's because you'd be surprised to know that actually there's 25% of strokes happen under the age of 65. And in my research, I've spoken to a number of individuals, 19, 24-year-olds who've had strokes. And so different strokes not only is a safe space for those individuals who are younger, but also a variety of different ages. And they've got a Facebook group as well and support groups. And so I think, just as Rosemary highlighted there, it's not giving up hope and recognizing there are networks out there. Don't feel like you're alone, because you're not. Unfortunately, there are thousands of people in the UK who have aphasia. And coming out of lockdown, these individuals will be able to practice their speech so much more, thankfully. But for anyone who's on the receiving end, who's having a conversation with someone, because they might not even know that they have aphasia, just be patient and just be kind.
Vicky, very quickly, it's Tony here. Thanks for doing that. I've nothing insightful to add whatsoever other than to thank you for playing that clip. Your mum's personality absolutely shone through in that. She sounds wonderful. So thank you very much for doing that. Do you recognise your mum's personality in that? When you were talking to her there, you see you can see your mum happily in there, yeah?
Oh, definitely. She's a fiery character.
Sounds like she can laugh at herself, which is a good sign.
Yeah.
Age is always something that gets everybody, isn't it?
Yeah, no, she is so inspirational. And, from a young age, I think because traveling is so difficult for her, but she inspired me to follow my dreams and travel the world. And she says, if I can't do it, you can do it. So, yes, she really is a wonderful person.
Good stuff. Cheers,
Thanks,
Vicky.
Vicky.